Aurora police are once again investigating a video of men with guns trying to get into apartments. Similar to that viral video that sparked misleading claims that a migrant gang had taken over Aurora last year. Claims that brought then candidate Donald Trump to town, promising to liberate that invaded and conquered city. This afternoon, Aurora Police Chief Todd Chamberlain released video from June 9th, shows several men with guns repeatedly knocking on the door of an apartment unit, then hiding out of sight. Police say Venezuelan immigrants who had moved in just days before were inside that unit. Chamberlain says police have been called to that apartment complex near 6th and Potomac a dozen times since last August. Shootings, squatters in vacant apartments, tenants being held against their will. Police say they believe the suspects in this video were trying to intimidate and extort other residents, many of whom are immigrants. The police chief says this apartment complex is not under the same ownership as several other problematic complexes, which became infamous last year on the report that members of the Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua, or TDA, were extorting residents there. This video of armed men attempting to enter units at the edge at Lowry Apartments at 12th and Dallas got the attention of Trump, who then made Aurora the centerpiece of his campaign for president.
What I see on this video, it is very reminiscent of what we saw before in the city of Aurora. But the difference is we are not going to allow this to gain momentum. We are not going to allow it to gain steam. We are not going to step away from it. We are going to step into it. We are going to hold all of those individuals accountable.
Chief Chamberlain says, unlike last year's incidents, the management of this apartment complex is cooperating with police to get things under control. He says 2 suspects have been arrested. They're still trying to identify and arrest 7 others. We are continuing to see the impact of the Trump administration's immigration roundup shift, from his original promise to focus on the worst of the worst violent criminals to the reality, picking up people who are complying with instructions to show up at their immigration hearings. Witnesses tell our Angeline McCall they saw one such family separation happen at the courthouse in downtown Denver today.
It was alarming, upsetting.
At immigration court in downtown Denver, it's hard to process what they've just seen.
That is what ICE is here to do, is to separate families.
Volunteers and immigration advocates come here every day to accompany families to court, knowing what each person risks when they walk inside.
This morning, our volunteers witnessed a detainment of a father pulled apart from his family.
Witnesses say his partner tried to stop the ICE agents. She left the courthouse with only her son.
It was terrifying, terrifying.
Volunteer Arnie Carter was inside when ICE agents detained a father after the family's court hearing.
When he came out, ICE immediately grabbed him, threw him into the women's bathroom. His partner tried to rip him away from him, from ICE, and they grabbed her and threw her on the bathroom floor. And they kept telling the little boy, there's a security guard up there telling him that he's fine, everything's fine, he's safe. And that was the furthest thing from the truth. His world was crumbling.
Arnie knows this isn't the first family, but it was his first time seeing something like this in person.
Sorry it happened, and people need to witness this. People need to know what's going on.
Advocates wouldn't elaborate on the kind of case this was, but say it was different than the other courthouse arrests they've seen.
I know that we've never seen ICE behave like this before.
Volunteers will continue to warn families of the risks, and they'll have to watch when warnings turn into reality.
They were here in court trying to do things the right way, and we saw what happened.
ICE here in Denver put out a tweet saying one of their officers was assaulted at the courthouse today. We've called to ask if that was related to this arrest at the courthouse. We have not yet heard back or learned if there is any connection there, Kyle.
So I think, Angeline, originally there was a perception, right, that ICE was going to be going after people who are like on the run or in hiding. But in these cases, these are folks who are coming to court as directed, they're complying, and then boom, they get grabbed in the hallway. There's confusion at that moment and then confusion that follows.
Right. So you have families confused, right, naturally, because they're going to court. They say, they want to do things the right way. You have immigration advocates saying, well, if you have people and critics saying, well, do it the right way, well, this is the right way, right? And then they're getting picked up, grabbed by ICE. And then alternatively, you have families who are confused. Where are their loved ones being taken? Are they going to the Aurora facility? Are they then being transferred somewhere else very quickly? I mean, these are all questions that they need to learn very fast. And sometimes this may be the last time they see their loved one.
Yeah, and we're relying on eyewitnesses often in these cases because cameras are not always allowed in some of these buildings like that federal courthouse. Angeline, thank you. The Mesa County Sheriff's Office says that a group chat with federal agents was used to help ICE agents detain a college student after a traffic stop. The Sheriff's Office doesn't like this. They say it was done without their knowledge and potentially in violation of state law. Last week, the Salt Lake Tribune reported a 19-year-old college student from Utah, Caroline Diaz-Goncalves, was taken into ICE custody after a traffic stop in Colorado. The Mesa County Sheriff's Office now says they unknowingly helped make that arrest happen. They pulled Diaz-Goncalves over on I-70 near Loma on June 5th, then released her with a warning for following a trucker too closely. Shortly after, she was stopped again, this time by federal agents who arrested her and took her to ICE detention in Aurora. The Sheriff's Office says those federal agents were tipped off by a group chat between federal, state, and local officials the department was using for drug investigations. County says the feds used the chat to quote-unquote extrapolate information for their own immigration enforcement. Mesa County says they don't investigate residency status during their normal law enforcement interactions. But body camera footage from the traffic stop shows the county deputy asking the young woman where she was born.
Where are you from? You got a little bit of an accent.
I'm from Utah.
You're from Utah? Okay. How long you lived in Utah for?
Like 12 years.
Born and raised or no?
No, I was born in, oh my gosh, I always forget, I was born in Brazil.
Oh, that's cool.
Sheriff's Office claims that they were unaware that their communications were being used for immigration enforcement, and they have since removed all their deputies from that chat with federal agents. Diaz-Goncalves' family told the Salt Lake Trib that she was brought to the U.S. 12 years ago on a now expired tourist visa. The family says her asylum case is pending. Another wave of storms rolled through Colorado this afternoon after a rare overnight hailstorm for parts of the Front Range. Places saw tennis ball-sized hail in the dark of night. These are pictures of the hail that fell in Milliken. I can give you a look at the damage to cars in the neighborhood there. I mean, this wasn't one or two cars. It was like everything on the street had smashed windows. North side of the metro area also saw large hail. Then another round came through this afternoon. This was Platteville around 2:30 p.m. A river of hail there.
Severe thunderstorm watch is canceled out for Denver, but continues for areas south as we continue to track severe thunderstorms on the eastern plains. Can't rule out a little more thunder, lightning, and rain here in the Denver metro area after a cooler day. Compliments of that front that came through this morning, but the same front also brought that devastating hail right before the sun came up this morning. Heaviest storms expected south of us tonight, and we do have some showers and storms moving into Nebraska. We have a little bit of rain, lightning, and wind, and a new little wave coming off the foothills from the north and west. Right now, Denver dry, but we've had 1-inch diameter hail reports and frontline wind damage and straight line wind damage and thunderstorm wind gusts to 50 and 60 miles per hour as these storms track east and southeast. We should be done here in the next couple of hours, and we're off and running to the potential for record heat for the first day of summer. Temperatures comfortable this evening in the 60s, and we'll warm up and dry out. A much calmer day tomorrow at 86, mid-90s Thursday. Summer solstice Friday with a record high of 100. Starting off your weekend with record highs in the triple digits. Hot and dry on Sunday, and then cooler with a chance of afternoon storms back in the forecast next Monday and Tuesday.
A conservative radio station in Colorado that promoted unsubstantiated election rigging claims is making a full retraction and apology. KNUS played a key role in elevating the claims that Denver-based Dominion Voting Systems and one of its executives, Eric Coomer, were the ones who rigged the election against Donald Trump. Yes, this is the same claim that led a jury in Denver to find My Pillow guy Mike Lindell liable for defamation yesterday. On Friday, the owner of KNUS, Salem Media, posted a statement acknowledging no evidence has ever been provided that Eric Coomer and Dominion rigged the election. Salem apologized to Coomer, said it removed all those claims from its platforms. Coomer currently has a defamation lawsuit against Salem. Court filings do not indicate if this retraction and apology from the owner of KNUS Radio is part of a settlement agreement. KNUS hosts repeatedly gave a platform to Joe Oltmann, the podcaster and political activist from Douglas County, who claims he overheard an Antifa conference call where Coomer bragged about rigging the election. Oltmann has also called for the mass executions of his perceived political opponents, including elected officials and journalists. Oltmann has talked about hanging people or dragging them behind his vehicle until their limbs are torn off. Most of the KNUS radio hosts who platformed Oltmann's claims 4 years ago have since faded into relative obscurity, with the exception of George Brockler, who is now the elected district attorney for Douglas County. Oltmann was a friend of Brockler's and an advertiser on his show. Brockler told me today he does not regret having Oltmann on his program, and he doesn't have anything to apologize for. Brockler told me he didn't embrace Oltmann's claim, saying, quote, "If having a conversation about controversial topics on the radio is grounds for years later having to issue an apology, I think we're all in a lot of trouble here because everything looks crystal clear in the rearview mirror." Salem Radio's apology does not mention any of its hosts by name. D.A. Brockler told me he does not support Oltmann's talk of killing people by hanging them or dragging them behind his vehicle, but Brockler said he remains friendly with Oltmann to this day. The Forest Service forced firefighters out. Now it wants them back for the summer. Community leaders in Colorado worry they won't return.
When folks are asked to leave and then come back later, it's usually not a very successful program.
And Colorado's Jackie Robinson of classical music has passed at 104. A look back at the life of a legend next. Hard to fight a fire without firefighters. U.S. Forest Service may have allowed too many of them to resign. Now they're asking people who took Elon Musk's buyout offer to come back and help during this summer's fire season. Here's Mark Salinger.
When Colorado's largest fires spark, help arrives from the federal government. But the U.S. Forest Service and USDA lost too many fire personnel when Elon Musk and President Trump offered government workers deferred resignations earlier this year. Now they're asking employees who already resigned to come back to work for fire assignments this summer.
Anything, that's going to happen to bring more of those experienced, qualified individuals on board, the better off we're all going to be.
Vaughn Jones is the chief of Wildland Fire for the Colorado Division of Fire Prevention and Control. While he says the state is as prepared as it can be for the summer fire season, he acknowledges resources may be stretched thin.
As far as, sending out resources outside the boundary of Colorado, it's always going to be based on, what our conditions are here. Maybe as we get a little bit busier this summer, we'll be a little bit more restrictive with that than we have in the past.
It makes me lay awake at night and worry about those capabilities.
Republican Dan Williams is the chairman of the Teller County Board of Commissioners. In a rural county like his with large swaths of federal land, he worries about all the firefighters who've already resigned.
I don't know if that technique of a buyback has worked. I know the hiring action didn't really fill what they needed.
The Forest Service says it's hired 96% of its target of 11,300 firefighters nationwide. According to those numbers, they're less than 500 people short. But Williams says it's still concerning.
If you need more trucks, more people, more emergency managers, and you don't have them, it's going to be a problem.
As summer arrives, there's hope the resources available are enough for the fires that start.
We're feeling about as good as we can be headed into the core fire season.
President Trump issued a hiring freeze for the federal government when he took office. Wildland firefighters were exempted from that in April by the Agriculture Secretary, saying that they're crucial to national security and public safety, Kyle.
Mark, do we know where we're thin on personnel headed into the heart of fire season?
Yeah, so this is where you get into resource sharing, and we don't yet know if there are certain parts of the country or certain counties, even here in Colorado, or certain national forests here in the state that have less firefighters assigned to them right now than other parts. But again, that resource sharing, you hear the state fire chief talking about it, saying if California, for example, needs more resources than Colorado, will they be able to share it? That remains to be seen.
It just adds this ugly layer of potential finger pointing, right? Ugly but understandable, right?
Everybody needs it.
They're up against nature with these fires, and then if they're also up against whatever went on with the federal government, it's nasty business. Yeah, Mark Salinger, thank you. As the city of Denver prepares to lay off employees, he's now backtracking on proposed changes on who will get fired first. The city wanted to take how long somebody's been at their job out of consideration for layoffs. Instead, they wanted to go solely on performance and merit as the top factors. Well, you can imagine that some longer tenured employees did not like that deal changing beneath them. City got dozens of letters and comments ahead of a board meeting tomorrow on this rule change. So today, the city walked back the proposed changes, saying that length of service will again be considered when those layoffs are expected to hit in August. Colorado's art scene is remembering the life of a pioneering musician.
With his 50 years as a symphony member, he probably played for over 250,000 people.
The legacy, Charles Burrell, next. He's been called the Jackie Robinson of classical music. Charles Burrell broke the color barrier in 1949 when he joined the Denver Symphony Orchestra. His decades-long career made him an icon on this state's music scene. He died this morning at the age of 104.
He redefined dignity through his humility. Charles and my mother were first cousins.
Charles Burrell.
And I first met Charles when I was 8 years old, when he came here to Denver. The legacy that he left us with is A, being the very first African American in the entire world to get hired by a major symphony orchestra in 1949. Charles was the very first African American on the faculty of the prestigious San Francisco Conservatory of Music. I did an estimate with his 50 years as a symphony member, he probably played for over 250,000 people.
I feel like he was my godfather, you know, it just was like family. It was always like that. That never changed. The 50th anniversary of the symphony, we were taking our bows and he had the microphone and he said, the one thing that I'm proud of is I brought that one home from the hospital. And I looked at him and I was thinking, did you just make that up? I knew he was down to earth. I knew he was great. And that's how I thought folks should be. You know, you kind of think that people who are so great like that will live forever. He had an extraordinary life, and he loved his life, and he loved people. There's never going to be another Charlie Burrell, never, ever.
He did not suffer. They kept him comfortable. He was not in any pain. And the Angels decided to say, okay, come on, Charlie. We got this big, huge orchestra, so you can come on up here and join us. And there he is.
What a man, what a life. Thank our Byron Reed for that remembrance. Back with your feedback next. Feedback tonight from Michael, who just wrote in to say that his father actually became friends with the legendary musician Charlie Burrell at their assisted living facility. He said, what a class act he was. Always came to the dining room all dressed up. Our Byron Reed's done a number of pieces with Charlie Burrell over the years, and every time you heard that man speak and talk about his life and play his music, you felt like you were looking through a window at a lost age of America. He was truly a classic. And as it was said, there won't be another one like him. And on a lighter note, Jim says, my wife says your pocket square is perfect for your shirt and sport coat. Well, thank you, Jim. Feels weird to speak to a man's wife through the TV, but tell her I said thanks.